Alrighty, football fans, welcome to the Inside Sports Studio. I'm Charles E. Smith Jr., and this is another edition of Football Talk. Hard to believe we're already up to Week 11, but here it comes. We got to break things down. Been some big wins and losses this past week. Fantastic, huge games coming up this next weekend, and we're going to break all that down, but can't do it by myself. I got to bring in my main man who was handpicked to co-host this show, none other than Chris Lardieri. You read him at footballnation.com, and also some of you follow him on Twitter. If you're not, shame on you. You should be, because he tweets out some fantastic stuff at Chris L Sports. So without further ado, here is the man, Chris Lardieri. Chris, what's happening?
Charles, thank you. The introductions get better and better every week. I completely appreciate it, and the hand-picked, I'm quite flattered. Thank you very much.
Hey, I only speak the truth, but you know what? Let's go ahead and we got to give you your props, though, to start. Football Nation, love reading the columns there, and what have you got for us this week?
Thank you. In this week's FN Follies column, where I traditionally take a more humorous look at the goings-on in the NFL, I had a proverbial soft pitch tossed over the plate for me to tee up on, and it was the front-page story in the New York Daily News about how a bunch of Tim Tebow's unnamed teammates think he's terrible, don't think he's starting quarterback material, so on and so forth. And I think the irony of it all was myself and a lot of the other so-called experts thought that Tebow would be divisive, and in an odd way it's rallied the troops together behind Mark Sanchez. Now, if only he had someone to throw to, they might be in better shape. But, yeah, it looks like everyone's turning on Tebow, and at the end of the day, it's really not his fault. There's just not much talent on this team.
Yeah, well, there's not much talent on the team, and I don't see where, well, yeah. You know, Tebow is there, and it's one of those things where even if they rally around Sanchez, they got a mess of a situation there in the Jets. We could actually spend the entire show breaking down what's wrong with the Jets and the Chargers if we wanted to stay in the AFC. But, yeah, in a nutshell, I think it's, you know, as young as the team is when they're just put together, as far as Sanchez getting their AFC Championship game his first 2 years, but is it time to just blow up that roster over there in, you know, for the Jets?
Yeah, and what's funny is someone's head's going to roll, and I don't necessarily think it'll be Rex Ryan's. I think ownership will give him the benefit of the doubt. But to hear his press conferences now, he's just rambling on, and oh, he's defending Sanchez, and it's his quarterback, but they're going to get Tebow more involved. Starting to feel like he's that former Iraqi information minister who said that everything was fine when the U.S. tanks were rolling through Baghdad back in '03.
Okay, well, you know, that kind of wisdom and everything goes from Chris's FN Follies column there on footballnation.com. If you haven't been there, you owe it yourself to check it out. Good, quick read, you know, a lot of, shall we say, good satire there. Good old school stuff. If you want to know what real writing is about, read that column and you will definitely understand it. But there needs to be more writers like Mr. Lardieri out there, as a matter of fact. And thank goodness we have the World Wide Web now, so he is out there, and you owe it to yourself to read. Even if you're not necessarily a big football fan, you will love the columns as I love those columns.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, let's get into this past week before we get into breaking down what's coming up in Week 11. Week 10 was pretty eventful, and, you know, what can you say? It was just kind of a bad week to be a starting quarterback at home. I mean, Alex Smith goes down. Jay Cutler goes down with a concussion as well. Big Ben on Monday night with a shoulder injury against the Chiefs. And Michael Vick, probably most notable against the Cowboys, in Philly. He goes down, and maybe Vick is just down and out, and that may signal the new era as Nick Foles came in the second half to play for the Eagles. But that may be the end of the whole Vick experiment there in Philly. We can start with that one.
Yeah, I think the Andy Reid, who's probably heading into his last days as head coach in Philly, finally has his out now with Vick with the concussion. They say of all the injuries, his might be the most serious, he and Cutler. So I think it's a perfect out for him. Get Nick Foles in there, see what he can do, look for the future. At the end of the day, Nick Foles can't play defense, and as we saw Tony Romo, Felix Jones and company just light up the porous Eagles defense. defense on Sunday. So regardless, it'll be a little bit of an audition for Foles, but I think it's fairly safe to say that game put the final nail in the coffin for any playoff hopes for the Eagles.
Most definitely. And then also with Cutler getting knocked out of the game against Houston on Sunday night, the one thing that's got to be a little bit disturbing about this with Cutler is that he's had these problems before, and it was, the hit was solid, not maybe as vicious as it looked because he was a little bit off balance as he got hit, so he went and kind of fell flat. But Cutler out with another concussion, and you wonder if this is going to become, really a recurring theme to him, unfortunately, as he's still pretty early on in his career.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because you know what? He was in the open field. It was kind of a controversial play in that even the NBC announcers thought he hadn't crossed the line of scrimmage. But the Texans defender who nailed him was penalized for a blow to the head. I know it was a little bit close, but still. So in that respect, I do feel bad for Cutler. Kind of maybe not necessarily a cheap hot shot, but something that was worthy of a flag. So you hate to see that happen. And, for all those people out there who say that there's no more defense in the NFL and you can't hit, I submit to you that play. Jay Cutler got a concussion. He's probably going to miss a very important game this week against the 49ers on Monday night. I have nothing more to say. We got to be concerned with player safety, especially these quarterbacks, and that's a perfect example of that.
Definitely. And you talk about that big game in Frisco, and, who knows who Frisco's going to be starting? Excuse me. Will it be Colin Kaepernick? Because, hey, Alex Smith gets knocked out of that game against the Rams, overtime thriller, which was, imperfectly officiated, imperfectly played, and deserved to end in a tie. That's all you can say about that game. But also Alex Smith, maybe a little bit of worry there too.
Yeah, and they say of the three, the signal callers that got concussions this week, he's probably the most likely to come back, but still you can't rush guys back nowadays. So we could be seeing a Jason Campbell, Colin Kaepernick showdown in San Francisco on Monday night. And going into that game, I'm sure our friends in Bristol, Connecticut were looking forward to it, and now they might have a couple second stringers determining the outcome of the game.
Yeah, so it's really going to come down to which coach has their team more well prepared to play as a team and not necessarily relying on the quarterback to get everything done. And I think that that may bode well for Frisco because it looked like Jim Harbaugh was kind of heading in that direction. Anyways, he was making the game so that it wasn't something where Alex Smith had to go out there and try to win the games. So he's rounding the team and really focusing around Frank Gore. So that may work out well for Frisco in this game.
Yeah, definitely. And Kaepernick also brings that kind of Tebow type aspect to his game where he can run the ball. He could do a little wildcat, and at the very least, he's a heck of a lot more mobile than Alex Smith.
There you go. Now, one other thing, we know that Atlanta's undefeated season came to an end. They were 8-0 going into New Orleans, lose 31-27, but a recurring theme, and this is why people are a little reluctant to get on the Atlanta bandwagon despite what Roddy White may have said during the week. But I got to ask you, in looking at that final drive, did Matty Ice melt in that 31-27 loss against New Orleans? We're talking second and goal from the 1-yard line. They don't get the ball in. Is that Matty Ice not being on target? Is it bad play calling? Talk to me.
I think it's kind of a perfect storm there. Yeah, Ryan's got to get his team into the end zone, but as you and I know from watching football for many years, it's very hard to throw down there from the 3-yard line and even the 5-yard line. Things get bunched up. Not a lot of room for the receivers, a little more shoving, a little more blanket coverage. So in that respect, I'll give them a pass. But even in that last drive of the game, when they got the ball back after stopping the Saints and who had the punt, I mean, he overthrew a wide-open receiver, just some poorly thrown balls. So for that, I fault him. But in that particular goal line, it reminded me a lot of the playoff game last year against the Giants, questionable play calling on 4th and 1. Even when you're running Turner, I'm sorry, he's a big boy. He's got some speed. You got to get in the end zone there. And I think you hit on it. You can give Ryan some of the blame, but the play calling and some of the execution were real clearly left something to be desired. So not jumping off the Matty Ice bandwagon yet, but he better step it up when games get tight like this heading down the stretch and in January.
You're not jumping off the Matty Ice bandwagon, but you have got your sneakers laced up tightly in case you got to. You want to hit the ground running, right?
You know what? You hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst.
Well, and speaking of preparing for the worst, we talked about the Jets. What about, let's get back over to the AFC, the Chargers. And we saw Phillip Rivers now throw one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen. This was horrible. And I watched that Super Bowl with Neil O'Donnell, so I've seen some bad interceptions. But what he did against Tampa Bay, completely inexcusable. And are they just done? And we heard the voice of A.J. Smith earlier in the season talking about, was it time to just kind of go in another direction? Is this the end for the Chargers?
Yeah, if they don't make it, I think it really could be. I mean, the first to go will be Norv Turner. There have been some cries about maybe Rivers isn't the same quarterback as he needs to go. I don't think so necessarily. The guy really hasn't been surrounded by talent. I think he's almost Sanchez-like. He's forcing the ball. He's trying to make too many plays. That interception was inexcusable. It made Eli Manning's against the Bengals last week look somewhat tolerable, although not much. But and I think, besides Turner, I think A.J. Smith's got to be the one to go. He really he's kind of rubbed people the wrong way down there in league circles. And on top of that, who's he throwing to? Denario Alexander? I mean, they brought in Robert Meacham. Guy's done nothing this year. Other than Gates, who's been banged up and is finally starting to come around, he's really got no weapons. Ryan Matthews has never panned out. And I think ultimately Rivers just trying to do too much.
All right. And, the one thing when we talked about the quarterbacks that all got injured, let's go ahead and just jump back a little. But Big Ben going down against Kansas City, shoulder injury, and from now what I understand, they call, significant rib injury, which I guess that's subjective depending on if your glass is half empty or half full. It looks like he's going to miss this game against the Ravens, and then maybe down the stretch, he may miss one more game, it looks like, but the Steelers without Big Ben. And then, as we talked about with Frisco, though, the Steelers are prepared, and you got to like the way that they installed this offense this year, where they have a lot more short routes, crossing routes, and it's not about Ben just hanging in the pocket and waiting for a receiver to get open. But that scheme may suit them well as Leftwich comes into play.
Yeah, and I think back to last year's game when Roethlisberger was hurt against the Ravens. I believe they had Dennis Dixon in there at one point, and They still held firm and almost won that game. Yeah, you know what? If you want a guy to get hurt and you don't, better now than in late December when you need him. And I know even when he comes back, he's not going to be 100%. But that said, you know what? Let him miss a few games here, run the ball. If anything, the Ravens are beatable right now. They're not the invincible Ravens of old. I know they got back on track last week, but let's face it, it was against the Raiders. So if they get Mendenhall back, they might have a two-headed monster at running back, which could really help too with he and Isaac Redmond. So I think ultimately it's going to come down to the defense getting some stops, shut down Rice and Flacco, and get a chance to win this game.
All right, and we're going to be picking that game here when we get into our pick segment in just a moment. But let's go ahead and one team I want to talk about though before we get into that is back in the NFC. Let's get to the New Orleans Saints. And anyone who listens to talk radio or Twitter or any of the football shows, anything like that, the trendy pick is for the Saints to get hot and somehow make it into the playoffs and become a dangerous team and, all that other stuff, all that other Hollywood ending stuff. But the Saints, bottom line, they're 4-5. They beat one good team in Atlanta this past week. And, really they beat Tampa Bay, which is just beginning to learn how to win. But 4-5 right now, and just doing the math of it, you're going to need to be 10-6 at least to get a shot in the playoffs in the NFC. They got the Vikings at 6-4 ahead of them. They got the Seahawks at 6-4. Tampa Bay is 5-4, and the Saints they've got the 49ers. They've got the Falcons coming up again. They got the Giants, and they got the Buccaneers. I don't see them going 10-6 with that schedule coming up ahead of them.
No, it's going to be tough, especially the Falcons are going to want revenge. The 49ers defense will create a problem, as we saw in the playoffs last year. And even with the Giants playing so unevenly like they are now, that's no gimme. And, even the Tampa game, Tampa really should have won that first meeting. And Josh Freeman's really come around. And Doug Martin, probably the favorite for Rookie of the Year, so that's not going to be a pushover either. On top of that, even though they've gone this little winning streak and it looks like it could continue against the Raiders this week, that defense scares no one. It's not shutting anyone down. I mean, even the Falcons put 27 up on them. So unless they want to play old AFL-style football, I don't see it either.
Right, exactly. So, when you talk about, we can talk about the Buccaneers for just a moment here. And that is, I kind of like the way that team has come about with, Schiano, the rookie head coach there, Josh Freeman, who seemed like he regressed a little bit last year, but him coming on strong. The muscle hamster, Douglas Martin in the backfield running. I love that nickname. Him and Ray Rice are pretty much the same running back. But, they're really becoming a team and really coming together as a unit. And the way they hung tough and beat the Chargers, I like where they're going the rest of the season here.
Yeah, I agree. And in my preseason column, I picked the Buccaneers as one of these dark horses that may not necessarily make the playoffs, but they're going to turn some heads and turn things around. And part of that, full disclosure, I went to Rutgers. I enjoyed Greg Schiano's work there immensely, and I figured it would translate well to the NFL, separate of him challenging the kneel-down play, but I think all has been forgotten on that. He's really turned it around. And ironically, they've got a great tandem at wide receiver with Mike Williams and, lo and behold, Vincent Jackson, who the Chargers let get away. So I think that's really helped Freeman a lot. He's got more weapons on offense, got an excellent ground game with Martin, and his confidence is clearly back. And on the defensive side of the ball, they clearly have not quit like the team last year that just essentially gave up, I forget, 300 some odd points or whatever the number was. So Schiano's definitely worked his defensive magic on that side of the ball. No more gimme games down there in Tampa.
Yeah, gotta like where they're headed, and they picked up a lot of fans when they won that Super Bowl back in '03, and they've been waiting a long time to see something like this happen again. But it looks like Tampa, looking at the team, the youth of the team, the leadership of the team, it looks like they're set to become relevant again and remain relevant for the next 5 to 7 seasons, I'd say.
Definitely.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get into everybody's favorite segment here, the picks of the week, as myself and Mr. Lardieri prognosticate on what's going to happen here in Week 11. And I'll have to say, I'm one of those guys, sometimes you win big, other times you got to fight out and scrap, and other times you just flat out win ugly. So I was one game behind last week. I turned a 3-4 week into a victory of sorts, as now I'm up in the season series by one game. I'm 38-23. Chris is 37-24. Chris went 2-5 last week. Normally I clown him for that, but I only went 3-4, so I can't really. All I can say is, you know what? It was ugly, but it counts.
Yeah, and by that logic, I lost ugly last week.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get into picking some of these games here. So here we got the games of the week, starting with the Green Bay Packers. Not really, they've been kind of under the radar a little bit. Everyone talking about the Saints, all these other teams that are, we've just finished talking about Tampa Bay, but the Packers kind of quietly getting back on track, and they won 4 games in a row. They're sitting at 6-3, going into Detroit to play the Lions. Lions are 3-2 in their last 5 games, but they've had really an uneven season. What do you think, Packers-Lions?
I'm going with the Packers. They're on a roll, even with losing Greg Jennings. Randall Cobb stepped up. I think that the Lions, as we talked about week after week, and the Vikings exposed it this week, are completely weak on defense. I think Rodgers will expose them, even with a limited running game. And basically, I think in the NFC, Chicago and Green Bay is your first wild card. So you've got a potential playoff team here on a roll.
All right, and you know what? I got to go ahead, and we're not going to disagree on this one. I love the way that they've been playing. And the Packers, I think it was a matter of, they're not the same team they were last year when they went 15-1. 15-1, everything was going right, and everything clicked for them on offense. But Aaron Rodgers, is a great quarterback. I just think he needed to remember how to win those dog fights, and he's doing that. They won 4 in a row. After this week, I think you can say 5 in a row. I'm going with the Packers in that game as well.
Makes perfect sense to me.
Okay, and then we got kind of a battle of the uglies. an NFC East matchup in D.C. The Eagles at 3-6, having lost 5 in a row, going into D.C. to play the Redskins, who have lost 3 in a row. So combined, they've lost 8 in a row. How do you see this game shaping up? Looks like Vic is not going to be playing. It's going to be Nick Foles getting his first start against a division rival. Talk to me.
You know, with the Redskins coming off bye, even though it's a battle of rookie quarterbacks, RG3 seems like a seasoned veteran compared to Foles. And ultimately, that's why I'm going to pick the Redskins. I think the week off will do them well. I know Shanahan was spouting off about retooling the roster and maybe cleaning out some of the proverbial dead wood, but I think that's all forgotten, and this is the perfect way to snap a losing streak by facing the Philadelphia Eagles at home, and I'm going with the Redskins.
Okay, and really for all the reasons you just said, I got to go with the Redskins too, and both teams kind of in turmoil, but yeah, the Skins have got more going on than the Eagles do, and I think Nick Foles getting his first start, being a rookie, like you said, and we saw the mistakes that the team started to make against Dallas last week, where they were really in that game. Foles came in, he looked good here and there, but you can tell he is a rookie quarterback, first start of the year, and yeah, I got to go with Washington on that as well.
Yeah, welcome to the NFL, Mr. Foles.
Exactly. So let's go to the next game, and that is the New Orleans Saints. We just talked about them, 4-5 at Oakland to play the Raiders. Raiders at 3-6. Raiders have lost 2 in a row. Saints have won 2 in a row. But Carson Palmer, the last couple of weeks, he's lit it up through the air. So could we have maybe another perfect storm scenario with Carson Palmer throwing against a relatively porous Saints defense and secondary?
Definitely, and we know the last time the Saints came to the Bay Area, that great playoff game against the 49ers that they lost, you could see a back-and-forth affair like that. Picking the Saints ultimately because with Darren McFadden out, I don't know really who's going to run the ball for the Raiders, and I think the Saints are more well-balanced on offense, and I'll take Drew Brees over Carson Palmer at the end of the day.
You sure you want to go on a limb like that?
Yeah, I think I will. You know what? The Saints got a little bit of momentum behind them, and the way to keep a winning streak going is to play the Raiders. So I'll stick with my guns.
All right, there you go. And you know what? I have little to say about that game. I got the Saints. The Saints, like I said, I don't think they will ultimately make the playoffs, but they are hot right now, and they're hot enough to beat the Raiders in Oakland this Sunday. That's why I'm going with the Saints. Now, the San Diego Chargers. 1-4 in their last 5. Denver has won 4 in a row. This one's in the Mile High City. We remember what happened the last time. Chargers blow a 24-0 halftime lead, give up 35 unanswered points to lose 35-24 on Monday Night Football. And here we go, last gasp for the Chargers. Denver wins this game. Denver has got a stranglehold on the division. Chargers would go down to 5-5. Denver will be sitting pretty at 7-3. And we're coming down to the home stretch here.
I'm going Broncos. The fact that they'll be home for the first time in a few weeks, and the fact that they know they could put the final nail in the coffin and potentially lock up this division fairly early, combined with the fact that the Chargers are just reeling. I really don't trust Phillip Rivers right now, and the Denver defense will present just as much, if not more, of a formidable challenge than the Tampa Bay defense did. All signs point to Denver. I think Peyton Manning wins this one.
Yeah, and they'll be they'd be 7-3, and I misspoke there. The Chargers would be 4-6 if they lose this game, and 4-6 with only 6 games left to play in the season would not bode well for them. And in the Mile High City, like you said, everything in Denver's favor. Denver's defense playing inspired ball. The defense is healthy. Manning is fit in there, so yeah, I got to go with the Broncos in this one too. And for all you out there who may have if you like to put a little money on games here and there, go ahead and take the over on this game. I think you'd be okay.
Fair enough. And, just take a page from President Obama's book. Make sure, Chargers, you're prepared for the altitude, or you might have a lackluster performance like you did in the first debate.
All right. So now we get into the really interesting games here. The Indianapolis Colts won 4 in a row. The Patriots have won 3 in a row. Andrew Luck, the rookie, so this is kind of the the rookie kid going against the master. The Colts in New England to face the Patriots. What do you think? Both teams at 6-3.
I'm happy a Colts-Patriots game is relevant. I thought it'd be a few years before we'd see that. Going with the Patriots, I think they're on a little bit of a roll, although their defense is quite suspect and has a lot of question marks. They owe Ryan Fitzpatrick an early Christmas present for that gift he gave them last week at the end of the game. But I think ultimately, given that they're home and they too, like the Broncos, probably want to put this division away sooner than later, I think Brady and company school the young Andrew Luck, although I don't think by any means it will be a blowout. Andrew Luck's really impressed me, and I'm hoping for a good game at the very least.
Okay, well, I see I can look at all those points, but what I'm going to have to do here is, looking at the way that I've seen Luck play and the way that he throws the ball and just the way that the Patriots secondary is, I think they're going to get some chances downfield, and I think they'll be able to capitalize here. They'll have decent weather there from what I understand. I think it'll be decent weather. So I like Andrew Luck to go into Foxborough here and take care of business, take down the Patriots, not by much, but I think just enough to win, and we're going to see really a lot in his maturation process here. But I got to go with the Colts in this game. I like Andrew Luck against a porous Patriots secondary. That's where I think the game is going to be won and lost, and by the end of the day, I think the Patriots will win this. The Colts will win this probably by 3 points or so.
I like it. We digress, which means one of us will either be up this week or potentially tied. So it's good when we disagree. I appreciate it, Charles.
There we go. And you know what? Here we're probably going to disagree again, but the Ravens at 7-2, big AFC North matchup against the hated Pittsburgh Steelers. In Pittsburgh, though. So Ravens at 7-2, Pittsburgh's at 6-3. We know about all those defensive injuries for the Ravens. Ray Lewis is out, Ladarius Webb is out, but the Steelers will be missing Big Ben for this game. Byron Leftwich gets a start. How do you see it?
Normally I would pick the Ravens, but watching the way the Steelers played so poorly Monday night against the Chiefs, the fact that they're home, the fact that they're going to be missing Big Ben and it's their hated rival, I'm going to have to go with your Steelers here. I think it could be an ugly, low-scoring type affair where they grind it out, but just watching the way even when Roethlisberger played against the Giants and he didn't quite have his best stuff, they kept pounding the ball. The defense kept shutting down the Giants, and I think they're going to do more of that to Flacco. I think they'll shut down the run. Could be one of these 13-10 type games, but I think the Steelers are not going to miss a beat. Tomlin will have his team ready.
Okay, well, and I thought for sure you were going to pick the Ravens too, and that's why I said we were probably going to disagree on this, but I like this.
Fooled you.
What's that?
I fooled you for once.
You did. Yes, you did. I'm going with the Steelers too, and really for all the reasons you said, and because it is a big game, and I think that the Ravens are going to find some way to to mess this thing up. I've seen them playing too many big games. And I think, like we said, the Steelers, the way that Todd Haley is running the offense now, I think they're now built to get this done. And the running backs will still be by committee because I don't think Mendenhall is going to be healthy enough to play yet. So it's going to be all about Isaac Redman and Dwyer, those guys to get it done. And medium range passing by Byron Leftwich will control the game, control the clock. And I think ultimately that's going to lead to the win for the Steelers. And if Flacco goes pass happy, too, even though Polamalu's not going to be in there for the Steelers, if Flacco goes pass happy, it's going to get ugly for them. And I've always said about the Ravens, I don't think they utilize Ray Rice the way they really need to. And this is one of those games where you want to pound the ball with Ray Rice as much as possible and just go ahead and take over the game. But it's going to be interesting. This is a great Sunday night matchup, and I like the Steelers in this game.
Yeah, at the end of the day, separate of Flacco and the issues he's had, I just don't trust the Baltimore defense, and that's what nudged me towards the Steelers.
Right. Okay, so let's get down to the Monday night game, which will be the battle of the You know, we say battle of the groggy QBs, maybe, if both of them even play. The Bears in San Francisco, Bears at 7-2, Niners 6-2-1 after that tie against the Rams. What do you think here? Bears coming off that loss to the Texans. Cutler may not play. Alex Smith may or may not play. We don't know, but you know. Talk to us.
Whether the starters play or not, I'm going with the 49ers, and I think you hit on it very eloquently earlier. They're going to run the ball down your throat, and their defense is going to shut you down. I think what happened last week was somewhat of an aberration, maybe one of those games where they're looking ahead to their next opponent. But I do not see a Jim Harbaugh coach team having another letdown like that, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And even if it is Colin Kaepernick, like I said earlier, I think he's a little more of a threat to multidimensionally than Alex Smith is. So worst case, he may run the ball a little. He may deceive them with his throwing arm. I've seen him have some nice throws this year. So even though he's a young quarterback, if on the other side of the ball, Jason Campbell's starting for the Bears, I'll take my chances with Kaepernick and that defense, 49ers.
Yeah, and I got to go with the 49ers too, and that's, for all the reasons you said. And the other thing is, I've seen Jason Campbell play. I mean, I've really seen him play, not just watching ESPN highlights or looking at fantasy football picks or anything like that, but I watched him play in Oakland. I watched him play in Washington, and Jason Campbell is he's just brutal. That's all I can say about him. He's just brutal. I mean, whether he's throwing deep, throwing a little screen pass, or throwing something medium range, you never know what you're going to get from him. And I think that the ground game of the Niners, I think they're going to control the clock, control the ball, and as soon as they get the Bears down by 7 or 10 points and Campbell has to throw, it's going to get pretty ugly. If this game is to be won by the Bears, I'm looking at their defense probably getting 4 turnovers. That's what it's going to take. If they win the turnover battle by a margin of 4, the Bears will win this game, but I don't think that's going to happen, so I got to take the Niners in this game.
Yeah, and there's a reason the Bears are bringing back Josh McCown, and that speaks volumes about Jason Campbell and what they think of him.
All right, so we're just about out of time here, so any further thoughts here? First, let me remind you, follow me on Twitter at The Inside Sports. You can also follow Chris on Twitter at Chris L Sports and read his columns on footballnation.com. So as we head into our final week before Thanksgiving, hard to believe the week is gone so far. The year is gone that quickly. Chris, any final words for us?
Time flies when you're having a blast. As mentioned earlier, my latest column will be up Thursday morning about the whole Tebow mess and his teammates who don't think very highly of him. As you said, follow me on Twitter, Chris L Sports. One final thought, kind of tie into baseball. I see the Miami Marlins have this fire sale and trade their last few remaining quality players to the Blue Jays. And I think to myself, this is why people love the NFL. You don't see anything like that. Your team may have a bad year, but you've always got a shot at being in it. Even the Jets, you look at them, they're down now, but 2 years ago, this is a team in the AFC title game. Do we see that in baseball? No. So when the baseball purists scratch their heads and wonder why the sport's not as popular as the NFL, I point to instances like this, where you've got an owner running a shell game, a Ponzi scheme, call it what you will, and just getting a new stadium built and then dumping his team off. Thankfully, we don't have that in the NFL.
Yeah, definitely. And, when you look at Ponzi schemes, that's also how the NFL ran its salaries, or the NHL ran its salaries out of control with that expansion during the 90s. But that also is a whole entire another show. And this is football talk here on Inside Sports. So everybody, thanks for joining us. Myself, Charles E. Smith Jr., and also for Chris Lardieri. We'll see you next week, and keep on watching right here Inside Sports. See ya.